Good afternoon from the recording studios in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is a lecture for what? Museum studies. We haven't done a lecture in a while, you guys. This is one of my favorites, Encyclopedic Museums. I guess they're my favorite museum. Yeah, probably. And so here we go. We're going to go from the Paleolithic period with the Woman of Willendorf on the left, all the way up and through Cindy Sherman on the right. So that's a big span of time, my friends. Okay, we're going to be looking at the whole United States, but then we'll go abroad as well with encyclopedic museums. Now, let's have a definition. So, encyclopedic museums, their mission is to collect art from all time periods and all cultures. Hence the term encyclopedic. All right, let's start off on the East Coast. The biggest art museum, probably the biggest encyclopedic museum. Maybe is that true? Probably, maybe. In the United States, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's also the most frequented museum in the United States, and it ranks up there with the world. I was there in the summer of 1989. I was in love, went across Central Park, went to the museum for the first time, saw a Velázquez show. Some people believe that Velázquez is the best painter of all time. He's a Spanish Baroque painter of the 1600s. I've seen a lot of exhibits there, although, sadly enough, and I've told you guys this, I haven't been to New York City since 2020. It's on my bucket list. As soon as this things are changed, I can hopefully get to New York in the next 3 years. Let's see, what else? Well, yeah, I mean, it has incredible collections across the board, and some people believe they're putting out some of the best exhibitions over the last 5 years of any museum ever. And their Costume Institute is very famous. That's in the basement. It has the best fashion shows, probably in the United States and the world. And you just can't go wrong. You can be in there for hours and hours and hours. Now, the Brooklyn Art Museum was a little bit of a sleep there for, I would say, a pretty long time. But as of late, they've become much more well-known. Their profile has definitely increased. That is a sculpture by Ron Mueck. You may recall the nude, kind of rotund guy in the corner poster I have in my room. Same artist did that and did this. They have reached out a lot more to a diverse community around them in Brooklyn. They've done a lot more sort of cutting edge shows on contemporary artists. And they also have this incredible feminist art wing that just was created maybe about 10 years ago. And inside it, they have the very, very famous Dinner Party by Judy Chicago and other artists. It was in storage for something like 20, 30 years. So, yeah, I think Brooklyn Museum of Art is no longer the sleepy sister to the Met and worthy of your travels. Now we're going up north to Boston. Boston Museum of Fine Arts is celebrating its 150th year, as well as the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's weird they sort of came together at the same time period in the latter half of the 19th century. As you would imagine, it has a really great collection of American colonial furniture and portraits, which I love. And they also have a fairly decent Asian art collection because Boston was one of those ports that traded a lot with Asia. It has a new American wing that you see down below there to the left. And then to the right, they also, like many of these encyclopedic museums, they either do it or die, are putting out more shows with regards to contemporary artists. This is a contemporary artist from Africa named El Antasui. And the textile that you're seeing these people looking at the textiles made out of flattened beer bottle caps, which has a little bit of, well, not a little bit of a theme with regards to European colonialism in Africa. El Antisui is from Ghana, but has been living and working most of his life in Nigeria. Boston Museum of Fine Arts, great museum. All right, then we're heading back down south of New York City, down to the National Gallery, my beloved National Gallery. Lived and taught in D.C. for 5 years, as you know, in the 90s. It's a fairly young gallery. I believe they only got it together during World War II or a little bit before World War II. It has the only Leonardo da Vinci painting in the Western Hemisphere to the right, and I have made pilgrimages to go see it quite a few times, including just last June. They also have what's called the East Wing, and that opened in the 90s, so it's over 30 years, and you take a tunnel between the sort of the neoclassical building, the West Wing up top, to the East Wing down below. The East Wing was designed by the architect I.M. Pei, and it's seen as one of his biggest triumphs. And as you go down the tunnel, or the large sort of thoroughfare, there's a large bookstore and a cafeteria, and the East Wing primarily shows 20th century art. The West Wing, they don't really have an ancient art collection in the West Wing. So I'll say probably let's go Renaissance, 1300s, all the way up to the end of the 19th century is what you'll see between those two. And then last but not least, after I left DC, they created a sculpture garden, which would be also in, no, let me think here. Yeah, it's in between the West and East building. And there you see Klaus Oldenburg's typewriter eraser. That's their equivalent to the Spoon Bridge and Cherry, although it's not necessarily seen as, oh, that's DC, as much as we look at Spoon Bridge and Cherry and say, oh, the Twin Cities. Love the National Gallery. Can't go wrong going there. Okay, then a little bit to the west and up is Philadelphia. And you're seeing the steps there. Famously, of course, Rocky Balboa in the very famous movie Rocky with dun 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 dun. Thank you very much. That's my version of the famous song during the Rocky movie. He goes up there and lifts his arms and shouts, and there you go. Another very neoclassical building. Most of these museums, these encyclopedic museums, were built in the late 19th century when neoclassicism was all the rage. Down below, you're seeing a very rare Jan van Eyck painting. He's a Northern Renaissance painter. This is St. Francis receiving the stigmata by a six-winged Christ. I know the Catholicism is crazy. I was born and raised into it for 18 years. He starts to bleed where Jesus bled from, and then his brother is along. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you have my favorite painting by Henry Asawa Tanner, the most famous African-American artist of the 19th century. And this is his version of what's called the Annunciation, where the Virgin Mary is visited by the angel Gabriel, and they make a deal, and the Holy Spirit comes down and impregnates her with Jesus. And what's great about this painting is that she looks like she could be a poor Jewish woman in the Middle East. And then I also like just this sort of, sort of a ray of light, an actual sort of tube of light represents Gabriel as opposed to a angel with multicolored wings and a beautiful robe on. And then down below to the right, these are all works by Marcel Duchamp, the famous Dada artist. These are ready-mades, and he is the grandfather of all conceptual art. Which is big, of course, in the world these days, conceptual art. And believe it or not, the best place to go see Marcel Duchamp's works, it would be Philadelphia Museum of Art. There you go. I haven't been there in a while. When I lived in DC, I think I went there at least one time, maybe a couple times. All right, now we're going to the Midwest. Probably the best Midwest Encyclopedic Museum is, without a doubt, Art Institute of Chicago. I've been there many times. They also have a new wing, which is absolutely beautiful, where they have a lot of exhibitions. They also have a more contemporary art in that wing. And it also, I would say, probably has one of the best Impressionism collections and Post-Impressionism collections in the United States. The reason for that being that, and I think I've talked about this before, that all of these billionaires from the Gilded Age, robber barons is another term for them, had their associates or their dealers, or sometimes they went themselves. They went over to Europe and were buying what people like the artist Mary Cassatt was saying was the future, which was Impressionism. You might know this. The French of the day in the 1860s hated Impressionism and wanted art that continued the tradition of the Renaissance. So these billionaires bought up a lot of many of the most famous works today, and they're in the United States, including George Seurat's Sunday in the Park, Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte, which is, of course, very famously in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And there's other just great works. Also, you can see two of the most famous American art paintings. That would be, of course, Grant Wood's American Gothic and Edward Hopper's Nighthawks are in Chicago. And if you really love this museum stuff, go to Chicago, go there, go to the Contemporary Museum, MoCA, Chicago, go to the Field Museum, go to the aquarium. I mean, you could spend 4 or 5 days in Chicago and, not run out of museums. All right, Cleveland. This is one of the only encyclopedic museums in the United States that I have not been to. And it has a recent addition. There's a courtyard and some other things sort of beyond its neoclassical building. It also has a very decent Asian art collection. And I would also say that it has strengths in European art, let's say sort of Baroque up. They probably have some decent Renaissance stuff, but Avery and I, my son and I, at some point, plan on going to Ohio and seeing the NFL Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then getting to at least 4 or 5 encyclopedic museums in Ohio, including, of course, Cleveland. All right, Minneapolis Institute of Arts. So I've lived here since 1997. I think the first time I was at MIA was spring of maybe 93, 94. How does it compare? That's what everybody asks. We've talked about this before, probably. It was interesting. The former head of MIA was in my class a number of years ago, and she said, a lot of people like to say, well, my encyclopedic museum is top 15. And of course, the Met would be first, I think. And then all East Coast would be the top 5, probably. But anyways, I think it's okay to say top 20. Not to ding against the MIA, but that's just kind of the reality. We have an incredible Asian art collection, probably the best in the Midwest, thanks to the Daytons and for you spending money at Target. I would also say, what else does it have a fairly good collection in? I don't know, Renaissance to Rococo, kind of. And the most beloved work probably is Rembrandt's The Death or Lucretia. That's the one that they everybody wants in their shows, and everybody pretty much believes it's the best old master painting in the Twin Cities. They're trying to diversify. They're trying to bring in more diverse contemporary artists into a conversation with their collection. Whether or not they're successful or not, I don't know. I think it's a good effort. I'd like to see more. Okay, and then this is the neoclassical building, of course. And then there's the brutalism, very boring brick edition. And then the most recent edition is Michael Graves, God rest his soul. That's the Target wing, which is really quite nice, actually, I think. But in the end, nothing to really write home to mom and dad about. Okay, then you got to go down south, and I highly recommend going to Kansas City at some point in your museum travels. This is the Nelson Atkins Museum, and as you can see in the upper top left, it also has a neoclassical building, and then it's got this really interesting just cubes going down the hill there. I've been there recently, 2 spring breaks ago, yeah. And then the cubes light up, as you can see to the right. It's full of contemporary art. It has exhibitions. There's a little theme going on here. Anytime they make an addition to an encyclopedic museum, it's typically to show contemporary art. They just recently discovered they had a Hieronymus Bosch. And then they discovered they had something else recently, too. I can't remember what it was. But anyways, that was a big news when they said they had an actual Bosch. I actually saw it. It was very small, but still, hey, you got to brag it up. Yeah, Kansas City. Why not? All right, now we're going clear across to the northwest section of the United States to the Seattle Museum of Art. I have to say I was there as a very little kid, not to the art museum. And then just maybe 4 or 5 spring breaks ago, we went to Seattle. We have a niece and her husband and a great niece there. It's a weird museum. It's downtown. It's just kind of an odd layout. I'll just say that. And as you would imagine, Seattle, of course, is a real metropolis. It's a real cosmopolitan place. They do a lot of stuff with diverse artists. And then, interestingly enough, they have separated out their Asian art collection. It's in a beautiful museum that recently just had a new addition to it. And it's in a park on a giant hill overlooking Seattle. You can't go wrong. And it just opened its new edition this fall. It's in the building is to the bottom left. And then I regret this, we just didn't have enough time. There's also what's called Olympic Sculpture Park, which is right along the harbor. And it has a lot of just really, really fun stuff. And if you go to Seattle, you have to go down to the fish market and see them throwing fish. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, you can't go wrong in Seattle, or the Northwest, really, for encyclopedic museums. All right, San Francisco. This is Jennifer's beloved city. She has a sticker on the back of her car about it. So the De Young Museum is in one of the more famous parks in San Francisco. It's a newish architectural design. It together with what's called the Legion of Honor makes up the San Francisco Museum of Fine Arts, even though they are very far apart geographically in San Fran. And the De Young Museum and Legion of Honor, I'm always looking at what they're doing online. They had a former head of the De Young who just went to the Met. I think he's from Germany, and he always is very much, once he becomes the head of a museum, he just makes sure that they have much more content online. Thank God. I really like that guy. I should send him a fan letter. It's kind of difficult to talk about the differences between the two collections. Let's just say altogether they form an encyclopedic museum. That's the easiest way to sort of put it out there. I think the De Young is a little bit hipper, if I could say that. And as you can see, the Legion of Honor is very neoclassical. All right, so yeah, go to San Francisco sometime in your life. I've been fortunate to go there a couple times. All right, now we're down to LA, which is probably the art city that I'm most familiar with besides the Twin Cities and Washington, D.C., because I have in-laws in Los Angeles. And it was the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. They just demolished a number of the buildings that you see in the upper left-hand corner to make one sort of giant museum that goes over the 8th Street. One of the buildings will remain open, and that's the Broad edition that just opened about 10 years ago. It's really cool building. And so what you're going to see in the Broad is on the right, you've got Jeff. What was I going to say? Hold on a second. I gotta have a break here for a second. Okay, sorry about that. I just had a brain hiccup. Jeff Koons on the right with his famous balloon dog. And then down below, one of my favorite artists out of LA and really in the United States is Chris Burden. And when they were taking down the old lights in LA, the old street lights, he bought them and made this conceptual art piece in the bottom left. And then to the behind it is the new Broad Museum. And then this is kind of what you used to go into. I think it's been destroyed just in the last month or so. You used to go through this sort of pavilion into these various different individual buildings, and people have been wanting to kind of do away with the campus and make one large building, but it's been very controversial. You can look that up online. People are not happy about the new design. A lot of them aren't, but what are you going to do? Okay, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, great Asian collection once again. Seems like that's a major theme in all these encyclopedic museums. Pretty good with contemporary art, yeah, definitely. An odd mixture of stuff, to be honest. And maybe the new building will bring it all together. When I go to LA, I always want to go there to the LACMA is what the nickname for it, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, because they always have some good stuff going on. Okay, sorry about that. Whoops. All right, let's go forward. All right, the Getty. Probably with regards to where it is located and the buildings, maybe the most beautiful museum in the United States. It's so there's 2 campuses, and on the upper left, you're seeing the newest campus, created by Richard Meir, the architect, and it's a campus for sure. And on the right side, you can see the campus a little bit more up close, and then bottom is looking through one of the buildings. It's kind of odd. There's this modern sort of architecture, but inside are these period rooms from Rococo France. So that's a little bit odd. One of the things they always sort of emphasize, that would be their illuminated manuscripts collection. They always have something going on with exhibitions with regards to that. They are indeed the richest museum in the United States. Their endowment is over $1 billion. So they're kind of bullies on the art market. They come in with their big cash and typically buy things that they want. Anything they want, they can buy. Recently, they bought a Monet that's gotten a lot of attention. And then in the bottom left was what was the Getty Museum for many, many decades. It's now called the Getty Villa. And inside the villa would be ancient art, particularly Greek and Roman art. I've been there once. I'm not a huge fan of dead white male art from the Greeks and the Romans, but it's worth going to. So when did the actual new Getty open up? It's been at least Probably 30 years. Maybe that's a little exaggeration. I'll have to look that up. Anyways, go to the Getty. I'm taking you all through LA, people. Okay, now we're going to the South. I was chuckling because the South, let's just be honest, doesn't have as great of encyclopedic museums as other areas of the United States. And part of the reason for that, of course, is that the aristocracy was investing in slavery rather than art. That's just the truth of it. I remember going to the High Museum a number of years ago and really not being very impressed. And what's interesting is the same architect, Richard Meir, did the Getty and did the High Museum. But I will say this, I think the High Museum has improved in my eyes, partly because of the fact that they had this relationship with the Louvre Museum in Paris, and they were doing some cross-pollination exhibitions. And also the High Museum, like a number of different museums, is definitely reaching out to its diverse community. So it's getting better. And then the Dallas Museum of Art it's actually pretty decent. I mean, the oil billionaires did invest in some art. I've only been there once. I have a good friend that lives in Dallas. And they definitely put on some good exhibitions. There's not anything really particularly that they're known for as far as their strength. But there you go with that. And then now we're moving to Canada. Oh, Canada. All right. So first, we're going to go to the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. That I've been looking a lot at Canadian encyclopedic museums lately. They definitely make an effort to focus on Canadian artists, and they've all definitely in the last 10 to 15 years been focusing more in on Indigenous art, contemporary and traditional. And the Art Gallery of Ontario had a recent edition, and it was done by Frank Gehry, the same person who, of course, did the Wiseman Art Museum on our campus at the University of Minnesota. And you can definitely see the connection between the exteriors there. And then now we're going to go over to Europe. Some of these I've been to, some of them I haven't. So here we're going to start with where I have been, London, to the National Gallery. It's located on Trafalgar Square. If you're in London, you have to go. I would say its strength would be in Renaissance, definitely Italian Renaissance, also some Northern Renaissance. They have a great sort of profile online. They were supposed to have an Artemisia Gentileschi show this spring, but of course, with the situation as it is, it's going to be this fall. And they do big blockbuster shows. They're pretty much the equivalent of the Met, I would say, in the UK. And then the British Museum, of course, one of the most famous museums in the world, partly because it has the stolen Elgin marbles, which should be given back to Greece in your lifetime, hopefully. They're kind of sprucing it up a little bit. They just had a manga show. I just got the catalog for it a couple days ago. They're trying to be not just the dead white male museum of old, and this is one of their courtyards, which is quite beautiful, that connects all of their neoclassical buildings. Okay, here we're gonna keep going. Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. It's on my bucket list. It was closed for about 5 years. And it was only supposed to be closed for something like 2, but it took it 5 years. And they're on the cutting edge, without a doubt. They were one of the first museums to allow people to freely download their images and do whatever you wanted with the images. And in the case on the bottom left, there's a VW Bug wagon with Rijks Studio on it. Their most famous painting, of course, would be Rembrandt's Night Watch in the upper right-hand corner. And they also have one of the 36, a couple of, I think, the Vermeers that exist in the world. That's the Milkmaid. And it's the opening ceremonies with orange carpet there in the upper left. Gosh, I'm going to say in the next 5 years, I got to get there. I don't care if I have to take out a loan. I've got to get to Amsterdam. And then Paris, of course, maybe the most famous encyclopedic museum in the world is the Louvre. It is, it always has the highest amount of people that go to it every year. The famous glass pyramid was designed by I.M. Pei, who also, you know now, designed the East Wing of the National Gallery in D.C. And you basically go down escalators into the pyramid, and then you go to the different sections of the Louvre through hallways and underground hallways is the best way to kind of explain it. It's one of the oldest museums in the world. They started up early 1800s or late 1700s. Has probably the best collection of world art out in the world, probably. I was going to say outside of what? Outside of the world? So everything is collected from Neolithic art to all the way, well, this is important to note, all the way up to the end of the 19th century. No, I would say all the way up to the Impressionists. And then if you want to see the Impressionists to 45, you've got to go to the Musée d'Orsay, which regrettably I never got to. I was a poor graduate student, and I went into Paris. I saw the Louvre. I went to Notre Dame. And then I also went to the Pompidou, which is the modern art museum in Paris. But anyways, so famously, the Musée d'Orsay is in a former railroad station. And it's on my bucket list. And of course, has the best collection of 19th century French art in the world. Okay, so there you go. Go to the Louvre and then make sure you get to the other one, even though I didn't. My apologies. All right, the Prado on my bucket list, Spain, Madrid, and much like the Louvre, the Prado's original collections, was the Royal Collection. Jeez, I keep burping, sorry. Including, of course, one of the most famous paintings in the world, Velázquez's Las Meninas. They have been doing some really cool exhibitions as of late, focusing on old master female artists. They also did some things. I think they did something with Bosch recently. Anyways, Spain. I gotta go there very, very soon and get to Madrid and the Prado. I'd say it's probably behind the Louvre, the second most famous encyclopedic museum in Europe, probably. All right, and then we're going to Austria, to Vienna particularly, to their encyclopedic museum, which is the Kunstort Museum. And it has the best collection of Bruegels. Hold on. Got to get my dog downstairs. Okay, I'm back. Bodhi's is downstairs. Okay, so Peter Bruegel, of course, one of the most famous artists of all time. If you want to go see, what is it, about 7 of his paintings, go to Vienna. You could also see some Egyptian sculptures in the bottom left. So we've got a whole world art thing going on. And then you've got really interesting paintings to the bottom right. Forgetting the guy's name. That was terrible. Anyways, he made these portraits with fruit and vegetables. And in this case, that's kind of a weird, sorry, it's anamorphic art there. Yeah. So if you're doing your, post-college Euro rail, go to Europe for a month sort of thing, go to Vienna for sure. Okay, hold on. Keep going. Okay, now it's time to tell you what my favorite encyclopedic museum in the world is. And I'm going to go with the Met. Because I have fond memories of the summer of 1989, as I've already outlined. And being in New York City for the first time in my life at the age of 23. And yeah, it's an incredible museum. Okay, now let's go to Berlin, another one on my bucket list. So this is crazy. My AP students know this. In the Pergamon Museum, they actually disassembled and then reassembled a Greek temple. And, talk about colonialism. That's kind of crazy. And then the German Gallery, one of the best encyclopedic museums in the world. Lots of Northern Renaissance art, as you might imagine. Italian Renaissance, just an incredible collection in Berlin. And then if you ever get to Russia, to be honest, I'm kind of scared of traveling in Russia. I have my reasons. Anyways, the best museum in Russia, hands down, is the Hermitage, which is also the former collection of the royals in Russia, including Catherine the Great, as you're seeing here. And they've got the blue chip works, guys. They've got Matisse's, they've got Rembrandt's, you name it. They've got at least one, and more if it's Leonardo da Vinci. They have a couple Leonardo da Vinci's. Those Russians, they were rich on the backs, of course, of the serfs, and they spent a lot of money on art, and it's still there in Russia. All right, and then last but not least, certainly in James Allen's eyes, is Australia. And let's see. Okay, I got to take a break for a second to tell you which ones are which. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. We got to talk about 3 museums. The first one is the National Gallery of Australia, which is in Canberra. My apologies for mispronouncing that probably. So Australia is quite a ways away from the United States and Europe. So you're not going to see the best examples of, say, Italian Renaissance art or, art up until 1945. It was a long ways from art to travel. But, if I ever go to Australia, I'll certainly go to these museums without a doubt. And they also do some really nice themes with their exhibitions. So let's not come down too hard on Australia. So I think it's the National Gallery of Australia in the upper left. And then you've got the Art Gallery of New South Wales, Sydney to the right. And I actually have a friend that's been to Australia 3 times in the last probably 9 years. And she always brings me back postcards from all of these museums, particularly New South Wales. And then you have the National Gallery of Victoria, which also has a pretty decent collection and a beautiful atrium with glass art. Okay, we did it. I knew this is one of the longest ones because there's so many encyclopedic museums. I hope you enjoyed our tour, and make sure that you answer my question, which one is my favorite museum, sometime soon. Okay, bye.